A serial rapist is caught and jailed. Thinking he's getting out of prison many years later, the court sentences him to an island where the worst of the worst are kept from society. After decades, he is finally released. 50 years after his crimes, police are knocking on his door once again. But this time, it's murder they're looking to charge him with. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the New York Times best-selling author of close to 50 true crime books. I've dedicated the past 26 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. It's the summer of 1979 in Everett, Washington. Just to give you an idea of where we are, Everett is about 25 miles north of Seattle, with approximately 100,000 residents. Puget Sound looks out on the western edge of the city. A young woman finishes mowing her lawn on what is a gorgeous day. As she is putting the mower away in a tool shed out in back of her property, a young man, just 21 years old then, approaches her. He has this rage in his eyes, the absolute look of a madman on some sort of violent mission. He also has a knife and a gun. Don't do anything, he tells her. Get inside and get on your knees. She does as she is told. After closing the door, he then begins to bash her head into the concrete floor. Done with that, he smashes her across the face with the gun and then punches her. "I will kill you," he says. The man puts the gun down and begins to tie her hands behind her back. She sees this as perhaps her only chance to act. "I threw my body against him and caught him off guard, and he kind of stumbled against the wall," she recalled many years later to the USA Today. "I stood up and I was trapped, and he said, 'You're going to die now.' And I knew I was dead." As they struggled, the man pulls out his knife and cuts her across one of her hands she is using to protect herself. She then makes a dash for the door, runs out of the tool shed and down a nearby alley. Not long after, the man, Mitchell Gaff, is detained and taken into custody. Gaff is ultimately convicted of this offense, violent assault. He pleads with the judge during his sentencing. "I changed my life," he says. "I am a Christian now." Nothing like a locked jail cell showing a criminal the light of the Lord. How many times have we heard this story? The judge must have felt good that day, or needed to get away for a tea time on a golf course, because he gives Gaff 5 years probation and releases him into a work program. Again, it bears repeating. Gaff beat this woman severely and threatened to kill her. The only reason he didn't rape her is because she fought him off and was able to get away. Hitting the brick out and about after his wrists are healed from the judge slapping them, Gaff kind of stumbles around town, wandering and wondering what he'll do next. Idle time. Not a good thing for a guy like Gaff. A guy who later admits that, as a preteen, the older kids, girls and boys, made him perform sexual acts, which he says confused him and made him curious and ashamed. As he entered into adulthood at 18, he says he felt sexually inadequate, which was when his problems began. He drops out of high school. He starts taking hard drugs and drinking alcoholically. Here, he claims, he becomes obsessed with sexual thoughts of strange women and begins to fantasize about raping random women. I want to emphasize that the story about Gaff's history as a child is from Gaff himself. So let's take that with a grain of salt. After attacking the woman mowing her lawn and getting only probation, in July 1980, Gaff is kicking rocks in Everett, still looking for something to do. We'll come back to this scumbag soon. But on July 12, 1980, 22-year-old Susan Vesey's husband, Kenneth, walks into the couple's apartment. It's late in the day. They live in South Everett, and the couple has been separated for a time but has recently reconciled and is going to be living together again soon. Susan had just celebrated her birthday. Kenneth walks in and calls out to his wife. She doesn't respond. He checks the bedroom. Susan, a stay-at-home mom with a 3-month-old and a 2-year-old, is tied up and bound with an electrical cord. She has been beaten, raped, and strangled to death. The children were left unharmed. What's unnerving about this case is that 10 months before, in the same apartment complex, 23-year-old Teresa Avery's parents had discovered her nude body in a unit not too far from where Susan and Kenneth live. She was found on the floor of her living room. Her legs were spread apart. A ketchup bottle had been inserted inside of her. Her skull was fractured. Her ribs had been struck so violently, the blow tore her liver. Teresa had also been strangled to death with an electrical cord and violently raped. A stereo system had been burgled from her apartment. In that case, a 26-year-old man, Garland B. Bradfield, who lived close by, had been arrested, tried, and convicted of the rape and murder. Several hairs from Bradfield were found at the scene, and the stereo was found inside his apartment. He was also seen at the apartment shortly before her body was discovered. Which kind of makes you wonder, what are the chances of two men on separate occasions committing the same murders in the same apartment building? Between 1979, when Mitchell Gaff committed that assault on the woman mowing her lawn, and maybe even before that, and up to 1984, 5 years, Gaff would later admit he stalked and sexually assaulted scores of women, young and old. He claims that in just 12 months alone, from 1981 to 1982, he assaulted between 20 to 30 women per day. Per day. He describes these sexual assaults as putting his hands up women's skirts to knocking them over and onto the ground. And, in many cases, rape. I have to say, a guy like this, there is no stopping him. The only way he does not continue to commit these crimes is to jail him or put him on an island somewhere where he doesn't have access to the general population. It's a compulsion that cannot be suppressed. It's not like alcoholism or drug addiction, where you can get treatment and continue in a program that helps you abstain day in and day out. It's far different, almost like some sort of deformity in the brain. No matter what you say or do to him, as long as he has access to victims, he will reoffend. Let's move on to June 1st, 1984. 42-year-old Judith Weaver, a mother and bar manager at the Bell Nest Cafe in Everett, has been working since 6 o'clock in the morning. By 9:30 p.m., Judith is feeling a bit lightheaded from sitting at the bar and drinking after her shift. She tells the bartender to call her a cab. She waits 20 minutes and the cab doesn't show up. She decides to walk home. The Bell Nest is in downtown Everett, not far from her apartment on Rucker Avenue. She makes one stop at the local Dairy Queen along her route to grab an ice cream. A witness there later interviewed says they saw Judith with a young man at the Dairy Queen. She makes it home. At midnight, someone is walking down Rucker Avenue when they see smoke coming from the apartment building Judith lives in. It's her apartment where the fire is raging. The man runs into the building, begins pounding on her door, but there is no answer. Fire personnel show up not long after and find a back door open. They try to get in, but the smoke is so heavy, dense, and black, they have to stop. After they get a handle on the smoke and fire, they get inside and begin looking around. The fire had been contained to one bedroom, where upon entering, they see Judith Weaver, and she's dead. Not from the fire. Judith has been strangled to death with an electrical cord and, the medical examiner will soon learn, brutally raped. The fire had been set on the corner of Judith's bed to, investigators surmise, cover up evidence of the murder and rape. Fast forward 1 month later, a mother and her 2 daughters, both teenagers, are at home one night and sleeping. Important to note is that the mom sleeps in the basement. The 2 teen girls sleep upstairs. Outside the window of their house, a man is lurking, staring into the window, and he sees the girls inside their bedroom, which is when he begins looking for a way into the house. Let's take our first break. You won't believe how this week's episode unfolds from here. It's mind-boggling, actually. You are listening to Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps, a true crime podcast. I'd like to let you know I have a new book out, the first book I've published in 5 years. It's called They Came for Blood. I have always wanted to write Westerns, a dream since my childhood. Tom Callahan was once President Ulysses S. Grant's deadliest kept secret, a lethal gun for hire leading a team of assassins nobody knew existed. Now those days are over. Or so he thought. Therefore, when the past comes for blood, you either draw first or die trying. Look for They Came for Blood on Amazon.com or anywhere books are sold. Check it out. There's a lot of murder in the book, so it's not a departure from my day job. With their mother sound asleep downstairs in the basement, the 2 girls upstairs, the man slips into the house. He quickly contains both girls, hog-ties them. He has a knife. He tells them he will kill them if they make any noise or try to get away. Sound familiar? He then uses the knife to remove their clothing. For 2 hours, 120 minutes, according to the documents in this case. He repeatedly and violently rapes both of these girls. At one point, he even shocks them with the electrical cord he had used to tie them up. During the violent rape, he also chokes them and punches them repeatedly. An absolute horror for these girls. As he focuses on the older girl and begins choking her once again, this time with the intent to kill, the younger girl sees an opportunity, gets out of her bindings, and she takes off. Realizing he will be caught if he sticks around, the man takes off out the front door, and both girls manage to survive what is a vicious attack and sexual assault. This, mind you, while the mother is sound asleep downstairs, unable to hear anything. It's 1984, and Mitchell Gaff, that monster I mentioned earlier in the episode, is on probation still. Keep that in mind. When they catch the man behind the most recent attack of the two teenagers, with the help of both of the girls, it's not a shock to anyone involved to learn that it's Mitchell Gaff. So he has violated his parole. The judge sentences him to 138 months in prison, and his bond is revoked. He is now sentenced to serve both sentences consecutively. 138 months is 11 and a half years. Just think if he would have gotten a similar sentence instead of probation for that vicious attack and near rape of the woman mowing her lawn. This brutal rape and attack on these young girls would not have taken place. You see, there are some people who are simply a danger to the community and overall public. They walk around continuously thinking about who their next victim will be and when they will act out on their violent fantasies. There's no changing that, as I said, despite what you do to them. The prosecutors here know this man, Mitchell Gaff. They know he is a serpent of the worst type and will strike the first chance he gets. So for at least 11 years, they can sit tight and know he cannot reoffend. But he's in his late 20s when he goes to prison. They know he will be out again. 10 years pass. Mitchell is a good boy in prison and is slated to get out early. Of course he is. Why not? Reward the monster for good behavior. Allow him early release because he did good in prison. Anyway, it's now 1994. Gaff is called into the warden's office. They tell him he had been granted release, but he will not be getting out. He's not a free man, in other words. During his incarceration, Gaff had met with psychologists and psychiatrists, and they deemed the guy beyond repair and irredeemable, to put it into the simplest terms. They diagnosed him with a host of personality disorders. He's a sociopath, basically, and exhibits all of the characteristics. They know this. Smartly, the prosecutors filed a sexually violent predator petition just before Gaff was set to be released. They knew he would go back out and repeat his behavior. Why? Because inside, talking to psychologists and doctors, Gaff admitted to another 6 rapes. He also admitted to making obscene phone calls and having graphic pornography. He tells them about his fantasies, which are just the worst. Then they looked at his crimes, meaning the latest ones he was admitting to, and they see a pattern emerge. Ever-increasing levels of violence, the court documents state. That is the end result. He has not, in fact, been rehabilitated. He has progressed his fantasies and, like a pressure valve, being locked up has exacerbated that psychology churning inside of him. The guy is a ticking time bomb. One psychiatrist diagnosed Gaff as suffering from sexual sadism, which is a condition characterized by recurrent sexual fantasies, urges, or behaviors involving the psychological or physical suffering of non-consenting partners. Moreover, sadistic rapists tend to offend chronically, learning little from their past experiences. They even doubt that any certified sex offender treatment provider will accept Gaff on an outpatient basis upon his release, which poses a problem for the guy. As part of the condition of his release, he would have to partake in routine treatment. So what do you do with someone like this? The prosecutor makes a plea to the court regarding Gaff, saying, quote, "You know that feeling you get when it's nighttime and you're asleep, but something sort of rustles you out of your sleep and you hear this sound and you get this feeling and your head is trying to convince you that it's just the wind or it's the cat, but you still got this sort of feeling that makes you uneasy. It's the fear. And what that fear is of is someone like Mitchell Gaff." Just so happens that a new law allows for prosecutors to argue that guys like Gaff should be confined to McNeil Island, a special commitment center in Puget Sound. Gaff should be kept there, confined by water all around him, and not allowed back into the general population of the world. Of course, this produces another court hearing in which Gaff's attorneys argue that he has served his time and he should be free under the conditions set by probation. They lose that argument. So Gaff is sent to McNeil Island, so he can now be confined with the other sex offenders who will never be cured, for lack of a better term. 7 square miles. McNeil was once a prison. In fact, where Charles Manson had been held for a time. The prison closed, but they decided to use the island to house the worst of the worst violent sexual offenders and predators. When Gaff arrives, there are hundreds of these guys on this island. He'll stay in his own room and have the option to partake in sex offender treatment. That's his life now. Working with the prison system, psychiatrists make the determination regarding progress and when an offender can leave the island, if they ever do. In short, after you've served your prison sentence for a sex crime, the state determines if you are a risk to the community. They conduct hearings about sentencing you to McNeil. All of this is done under the Community Protections Act. There has been some controversy, as you might imagine, regarding rights. But look, you will not get an argument out of me. I think it's a fabulous idea. You give people chances. You give them parole. They serve time. They get out and they reoffend. You sentence them again. They see the light of day coming and the state says, wait a minute, you've had your chance and you blew it the first time. You reoffended. Now we decide where you live. Hear, hear. The issue that civil rights attorneys brought up was that someone sentenced to McNeil rarely ever left the island. This later changed, and they began to release inmates from the island. Other states have similar programs, but this is the only island. Keep in mind, at the time Gaff is sent to McNeil, he is looked at as only a sex offender. Authorities do not have Gaff on any murder charges. They, of course, suspect him, but they just do not have the evidence. It's again one of those things where the technology just wasn't available. How they ultimately nail Gaff on murder is nothing short of brilliant, I'll say. Some of the cleverest police work you can imagine. And they were able to pull it off because they knew they were dealing with an absolute idiot in Mitchell Gaff, and that he would in no way suspect he was actually willingly giving cold case investigators his DNA on a silver platter. I'll get into that right after another break. You might be asking yourself, if they had Gaff's DNA, with him being a repeat offender and his blood work and DNA in the system, and they had put it into CODIS, why hadn't it produced a hit on any of the unsolved murders in the region where Gaff committed all those rapes during the 70s and 80s? Fair question. The testing wasn't available. Testing, that is, to extract DNA from the evidence. And the samples left behind at the crime scenes were so small, the technology just wasn't there to find it and analyze it. It's that simple. And when the technology finally became available, they took another look at one specific murder they knew Gaff had committed. Judith Weaver, the 42-year-old mother raped and murdered inside her apartment. Catching Gaff for Judith's murder begins in 2020. It takes that long. With the technology now available, they take another look at Gaff as being connected to her murder, and they submit the profile they have on him against the evidence they can now test from the evidence left behind. 3 years later, in 2023, a hit comes back. But they still need to verify that hit with a new sample of Gaff's DNA. Before I tell you how they get his DNA, let's go back to 2000 for a moment, when Gaff petitions the court to release him from Pedophile Island. He claims that, as a much older and wiser man now of 42 years, he has seen the light again. He says he has undergone intensive therapies and has been able to change his ways. He even tells a reporter at this time he is remorseful for the pain he has caused innocent people. There was no excuse, no rationalization for what I did to people. He is quoted in an Associated Press article. That's all propaganda, put out there to help himself. Prosecutors fight him hard. They know he is blowing lots of smoke up the court's ass. And they win. Gaff is found to be a threat to society in 2000, and they order that he be confined to McNeil Island for another 6 years. When 2006 comes along, Gaff manages to convince the court to allow him to leave the island and live in a halfway house. He says he's proven himself. They concur and place him in a Seattle halfway house for sexual deviance. Boy, I wouldn't want to be living anywhere near that house. He wears an electronic device attached to his ankle so he cannot leave and is supervised basically all day and night. Look, everyone knows this guy is waiting to explode into a series of new violent sexual attacks the moment he has one bit of freedom. And I have to hand it to prosecutors for keeping up with Gaff and his case and keeping him confined as long as they possibly could. I think it's safe to say they are buying as much time as possible because they know he killed Judith Weaver, and they also know that technology is right around the corner to prove their case, if they can just get hold of his DNA. For the next 10 years, he is in and out of various facilities, forever on the cusp of reoffending. They even catch him in one halfway house with violent pornography, and then he begins touching other men in the same house. So this guy cannot control himself. He is even sent back to McNeil at one point. The pornography they caught him with is revealing and worth talking about. Gaff had made the videotapes himself, which displays the lengths he went to in order to feed that monster inside of himself. Using Girls Gone Wild infomercials he had recorded, along with violent torture scenes he also recorded from the movie Saw, he spliced together the films to meet his standards of violent sex and rape. When they searched his room, they found 44 tapes, along with hundreds of DVDs, CDs, and floppy disks. That right there tells us all we need to know about his so-called therapies. None of it is working. He is building himself up to reoffend, the same course most of these guys take. It's a revolving door they find themselves in over and over again. By 2018, however, they cannot hold Gaff any longer, despite what authorities say is a concern that he had been building rape kits as they find all sorts of items a rapist might keep on hand. Weapons, ropes, etc. Mitchell Gaff is then awarded unconditional release. He is now a free man to live as he pleases and, of course, reoffend when he chooses. Gaff is out of the system now, and he changes his name to Sam Wise Price, and he moves to Olympia, Washington. He is no longer required to be contained to an island or a jail cell. He doesn't have to check in with anyone. And he can do whatever he pleases. They know Gaff committed the Judith Weaver murder. They just need to tie him to it forensically. So, they devise a brilliant plan. They locate Gaff at his home. He is back living in Everett now. Smartly, they send 3 female investigators to knock on his door. Gaff answers the door in his pajamas. The investigators are posing as market researchers for a company making a new chewing gum. He tells them, "Come on in. I'd love to help you." So they ask him, "Would you like to participate in our survey?" "Absolutely," he says. "Just tell me what I need to do." "Well, chew some of this gum. Then, when you're satisfied, you can give us an opinion. Just spit the gum out into this ramekin here, and then tell us what you think about the gum." Gaff commences to chewing, and when he's done, he spits the gum, his DNA, into a ramekin, and investigators are now holding on to the answer to Judith Weaver's murder. Be back in 1 minute to conclude this episode. Of course, that DNA they get from Gaff ties him directly to Judith Weaver's murder. They knew it would. And he's an idiot for falling for that ruse. As the years pile up and Gaff is held, they begin looking at other murders and realize rather striking similarities between Judith's murder and that of 21-year-old Susan Vesey. They then go back to the evidence and with new technology are able to extract DNA from the ligatures used to kill Susan. Well, that DNA matches Gaff's DNA. It's now March 2026. Faced with all this new evidence, Gaff decides to enter a plea in April 2026. He pleads guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder. Judith and Susan have their day in court, some 46 years after they were murdered. Approaching 70 years old, Gaff is sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. After a life of victimizing women, and we will never know how many or how many he murdered, Gaff is finally off the streets for good. I have read that some believed that Gaff had many different faces, which is almost a cliched term for a true crime bad guy these days. Not so with Gaff. He had one face, that of a monster. From the time he committed his first sexual assault, which was likely in his young teens, to the moment they arrested him for murder, the guy defines the definition of not only the worst human beings imaginable, but the boogeyman hiding underneath your bed. My hope is that this man suffers in prison for the remainder of his miserable existence. Sorry if that sounds harsh, but come on. Mitchell Gaff is evil incarnate. That's it for this week. As always, be safe, be aware. Sources for this episode include Detention of Gaff, the Court of Appeals of Washington, Division 1, April 20th, 1998. Affidavits from the arrest of Mitchell Gaff. How Discarded Chewing Gum Helped Convict a Serial Rapist, CNN, by Nina Giraldo, May 14th, 2026. Rapist pleads guilty in 2 cold case murders. Amanda Lee Myers, USA Today, April 16th, 2026. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.